This week on the Jasu Review, an in-depth, in-progress review of the fantasy strategy game Battle for Wesnoth, including discussions of RNG mechanics and white whale games, whatever the hell that means. You can keep listening to find out. I'll also talk about my current and upcoming game playthroughs on Twitch and answer your questions in the mailbag. This is the Jasu Review. Okay, so we're doing a little bit of slight reorganization this week. We're going to start with the stream news and playthrough recap segment, just to get it out of the way. Perhaps some people only are interested in hearing the weekly report on how the stream playthroughs are going and what's coming up on the stream during the week. So for those people, we're going to be getting that out of the way first. And with that said, this week, we've still been working our way through Vandal Hearts, doing that delayed bad promotion challenge. In the end, sort of compounding challenge upon challenge, where we're both taking the bad promotions and delaying them for as long as possible. It's been really challenging so far, but doable. I think it's still possible that we may push through to the end of the game without ever taking that second promotion. We're right on the final chapter. Slogging our way through the Kane fight right now, which is pretty harrowing. The Sabina fight before this was also pretty nasty, although not nearly as bad as the Kyra rescue mission. So those were a few of the stumbling points we've had over the course of the playthrough. Other than that, as I said, it's been quite smooth. I've been learning a lot about the game as a result of this challenge. It turns out that character levels matter a ton. We had one mission where there was a group of enemies at level 26 and another group of enemies at level 29, and it turns out those three levels make a tremendous difference. It's the difference between your guys getting one-shotted and or not, essentially. Also, we learned a fair bit about the promotion mechanics as well, where it turns out that promotions are extremely significant. I did not realize this until I undertook this challenge. As far as I can tell, promoting your characters in Vandal Hearts effectively doubles all the damage you deal and halves all the damage you receive. So it's a huge difference going without them. The game playthrough has been very different than I'm used to as a result. On the one hand, it breathes new life into the game. I'm having to take this whole new perspective on all these different battles, having to try out all these new strategies where my old strategies wouldn't work before. And that's the point of these types of challenge runs, is to breathe new life into old favorites and keep them interesting and fresh for you. On the other hand, it's also caused the playthrough to go quite a bit longer than I was expecting, and it's been a lot more difficult, even more so than I expected as well, almost jarringly so. So to take a bit of a break from all of that, we switched over just for one day to Tobari and the Night of the Curious Moon. So this isn't going to be a full review. This was kind of a one-shot that we did on stream here. I just completed the game from start to finish. Took about 5 or 6 hours. So this is one that's been on my backlog for a long time. The reasonably old game was released back in 2012, and I was originally not super interested in it based on just the visuals alone. It's not a fantastic looking game. It's got visuals kind of reminiscent of old school freeware Japanese indie games that you'd see a lot all over the internet in the early 2000s. But this game actually has a free demo, which I decided to try out, and it sold me on it. It's a really interesting little concept. It has a kind of a moe high school girl anime style to it, almost Toho-esque in its presentation. The game itself is a 2D platformer that plays as kind of a hybrid between Super Mario Brothers and Kirby, where you've got slightly stiff momentum-based controls. It's sort of like Mario in that aspect, where you can jump on enemies and get high bounces off them, but you can also whack enemies with your magical staff, which causes them to drop power-up coins where you can absorb their powers, and that makes it a little bit like Kirby. And yeah, it was a pretty good game. I enjoyed it a fair bit. As I said, the controls are a little bit stiff even for a Mario game, although that's also quite characteristic of old school freeware Japanese indie games from back in the mid to late 2000s. And it starts off pretty breezy, as you would expect from a game inspired by Mario and Kirby. So yeah, it was pretty smooth sailing through the first portion of the game, almost a bit boring, except for the fact that you've got hidden secrets in every level. Often some branching paths, hidden secrets, and also in each level you've got a hidden moon that typically has some kind of a challenging puzzle to get at it, where you have to utilize specific special abilities in certain ways. And you have two slots for your special ability. You have two of them equipped at a given time, so you'll often have to combine them in novel ways to find the hidden moon in each level. And they're extremely well hidden. The game's, I think, 36 levels long or something like that. I only found three moons on the course of my entire first playthrough. So there's certainly some more depth to the game than appears at first glance. On the other, and speaking of more than it appears at first glance, so the first half of the game is simple enough. You know, Mario, Kirby, easy stuff, Nintendo games for babies, and all of that. There is a sharp difficulty curve to this game as you approach the end of it, to the point where it almost becomes an entirely different style of game, more on the Super Meat Boy or Celeste style of really, really challenging platformers where you're retrying 20 times to get through each segment. And it creates kind of a weird balance to the game where if that's your style of game, that those later sections are going to be great for you. But if perhaps the early game will be a bit easy for your taste if you like that kind of game. If you aren't into that kind of game, you'll really enjoy the, again, almost Nintendo-esque qualities and difficulty level of the first half of the game, but maybe not enjoy it so much once the difficulty starts ramping up. The other tricky thing about this is the way that the challenge moons, or the way that the hidden moons work, is they're very tricky to find. But in addition to the challenge of solving the puzzle to locate them, uncover the hidden secrets of the levels, you also lose your moon if you get it and then die later on. So in addition to finding the secret moons, you've got to get through the level without dying from that point forward, which becomes, as I said, exceptionally challenging in the later portions of the game. And for that reason, I decided not to go back and 100% this game. It just seems a little bit much for me. I've talked a bit before about how that kind of Super Meat Boy, Celeste style, constant retrying style of platformer is not really to my taste. But nevertheless, I enjoyed the game a fair bit overall. I got a good 5 to 6 hours of enjoyment out of it, and it's got more depth to it beyond that if that's your kind of thing. I can see you easily doubling the play length if you decide to go back for all of those hidden moons and getting the perfect runs through the levels to actually keep them. It's my understanding that there's actually a whole new extra world that ramps up the challenge to a whole new level if you collect all of those moons, but a bit beyond me. Probably not going to go back to 100% it, but I enjoyed my time with Tobari and the Night of the Curious Moon nonetheless. It also helped me discover a new interesting little strategy RPG on Steam. So the developer of this game, Desu released their newest game is actually a strategy RPG. It's called Trapper Knight Sharpshooter Princess, which somehow eluded me when I was scanning Steam for strategy RPGs earlier this year. And yeah, it looks really neat. So I've got a new one for the wish list now. Yeah, that's Trapper Knight Sharpshooter Princess is one you might be seeing on Steam or on stream from me in the near future. So that's been this week, Twitch streaming. Upcoming, we're approaching the end of Vandal Hearts for real this time. I know I said that last week, but we're gonna redouble our efforts to finish up Vandal Hearts, and then after that, we've got more Vandal Hearts. Once we're finished with Vandal Hearts, we're going to be playing a little bit of Vandal Hearts 2. I don't want to do a full playthrough because Vandal Hearts 2 is not a very good game, and it's also extremely long, but it's also extremely interesting. There's a lot of unique mechanics just in terms of the turn order and the skill system and just all sorts of interesting things, and also kind of funny things in terms of the graphics and presentation too. So it's a interesting little game worth showing off. I think I'm going to play through the first chapter or so of the game to show it off for you guys. Might take 1 or 2 streams, and then we're going to move on from there to, I haven't quite decided what just yet. I'm really interested in the original Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. The trilogy, the Phoenix Wright trilogy, was actually released on Steam fairly recently, I believe, and Twitch chat has kind of talked me in giving this one a shot on stream. I played the second 2 Phoenix Wright games, but not the first one, so that's the one that I would be playing on stream. Yeah, really interested in trying that out fairly soon. However, the Ace Attorney trilogy is somewhat expensive, a little bit rich for my blood, so I'm going to be waiting for this one to go on sale, and then as soon as it does, we're going to pick it up and play it on stream. And until that happens, the next big thing we've got coming up is the 4-job fiesta. That's a couple weeks from now, so I don't want to start anything too big that's going to overrun into that. So it's probably just going to be one-offs on stream here until that point. I know I've got some stuff in the suggestion box. We're probably going to try out some Ninja Warriors and Drawd RPG and a few other quick little games that I've got in mind. So that's what you can expect in the coming weeks on stream here. And now, on to the Battle for Wesnoth discussion. So, Battle for Wesnoth is a turn-based strategy game with a high fantasy theme. Its main distinguishing feature is that it's an open source game. Have been a lot of contributors working on this project over the years. It's been in continuous development since 2003, so over 15 years at this point, and it's in development to this day. The last update was in April as of the time of this podcast, and that was right before the month before I started playing this game. So they're still adding new stuff to this day, new features, revising the interface and the graphics, adding new campaigns and revising the old ones. There are 17 campaigns in the core game as of me saying this. And in addition to all that, you've got all sorts of community content provided by users and players of the game, just as far as mods that add new units or change the interface or the basic functionality of the game, all sorts of user-made campaigns and scenarios. You've got a multiplayer mode as well with all sorts of just mods and user-created maps. So yeah, it's a very rich community, a very highly customizable game with tons of content out there. There's a lot to dive into here. I've been basically just sticking with the core unmodified game with my playthrough so far, but definitely all of the extra extended features provided by users has me intrigued, and I will probably check all that out at a later date. As far as what the game itself is, this is a hex-based strategy game. It's sometimes billed as a tactical RPG, but I'd say it leans more heavily on the strategy side of things. You have a home base where you produce units on most maps. You've got towns dotted across each map that you can capture to increase your gold income and produce even more units. It's a lot like Advance Wars, just in the basic concept. And also very much like Master of Monsters, which I haven't actually played, but reading statements from the developers, that was apparently their main influence or behind this game was Master of Monsters, which I am now suddenly interested in checking out sometime in the near future. In addition to the basic strategy elements of producing units and capturing towns, though, you've got some RPG elements here as well. Each map you'll have a leader who's kind of the core of your army. You need to sit him in the base in order to produce units, but there's also kind of a balance where your leader's also a decent fighter as well. So you got to decide, am I going to sit him back to produce units, or is it time to send him out to the front line, help out? You've also got an experience system where your units will gain XP for killing enemies, and they'll level up and promote to new classes. A lot of the units have branching class paths, so you can sort of choose their progression over the course of the game. And it really is over the course of the entire campaign. Your surviving units at the end of a scenario can be recalled and used again in the next scenario. So you've got units with persistent level growth over the course of a campaign, but also as is traditional for the genre, you've got permadeath as well. So those units you've been leveling up over the course of 6 or 7 or 15 scenarios can die, and then you lose them forever and have to build a new one. There's tons of different types of units to choose from in this game. That's another one of the game's big selling features. 200 units the game boasts. Mind you, that's mostly those promotions and branching class paths that I was talking about. But even then, you've got something on the order of probably 80 to 100 basic units in the game. And those are divided into 7 factions that all have their own different specialties and play kind of differently. The humans are the most basic one, where they essentially just have a lot of heavily armored infantry and cavalry. You've got the undead, who are a little bit more unique. They get a big attack bonus at night. They can poison enemy units and inflict plague that converts them into zombies. They got a lot of life-draining units as well, but they aren't that great stat-wise. So yeah, a lot of interesting little units with the undead faction. And then you've got the elves, who in true elf fashion are just kind of a tremendous pain in the ass. They get a huge bonus from forests. Essentially, they can move through forests very quickly compared to other factions, and they get a big evasion boost when they're sitting in the forest, which is, as I said, really obnoxious. Can't stand the elves. So yeah, your units in this game are the reason the game is able to have so different units is because they're all differentiated by a bevy of just different stats and systems here. You've got each unit has its own set of weapons, usually more than one weapon that has a specific amount of damage, number of attacks it does, whether it's melee or ranged or has some other special property. Your units have resistances to certain types of damage. They'll have specific terrain bonuses as far as which terrain they can move through effectively and which terrain they are most defensible in. Similar to the Shining Force system, where terrain bonuses are determined individually by unit. Apart from that, units all have different traits and abilities, where they'll be either healers or leaders that give your other units passive buffs, or they'll inflict some status effect. And then there's also time of day bonuses as well. Some units are more effective at night or in the daytime. So yeah, there's tons of different factors that go into making all of these units. And as a result, there's a lot of different playstyles that can result from that. You can kind of decide how you want to compose your army, play it in your own different style depending on the scenario. There's tons of stuff to learn here. It's an incredibly deep game, but at the same time, it's also very simple to play. So I've been talking about all of these stats and abilities and stuff, but there are no active abilities, no spells or skills or anything to worry about. All of your units can move and attack. That's all they do. Yeah, no spells, no active abilities, and all of the combat math is actually extremely simple. Damage is basically deterministic. Each weapon does a fixed amount of damage that gets modified by the defender's resistance. That's all there is to magic. And then you've got the chance to hit, which is also very simple. It is the defender's terrain bonus. Like I said, elves get a big evasion bonus in forests, so an elf on a forest, you got a 30% chance to hit. That is the only factor that goes into determining your chance to hit in this game is what type of terrain the defender's on. And that's another really big and kind of controversial element of the game, is the whole chance to hit RNG dice rolling system. It's almost game defining, actually. If you look in the forums or just the discussions online about this game, it's a big controversial thing. You will find epic, like dozens of page-long threads in the forums on Steam and on the official Wesnoth.org forum just about whether or not this game has too much randomness, too much RNG underlying all of it. We'll go into a full discussion of the RNG and roll to hit system in this game later on, but for now, I'll tell you my impressions and thoughts of everything else. Before we start the full discussion of what I thought of the game, it's important, I think, to note that my thoughts here are by no means definitive. This is not a complete and full review of the game, more of an in-progress review. I'm still kind of a novice at this game. I've only played through the first 3 campaigns and a smattering of other scenarios. So I think it's important to mention that in the first place, is that my thoughts on this game are by no means finalized. I'm still working my way through it, still relatively new to the game, but it's a really deep and interesting game. So even having not fully experienced all of it, I think there's still a lot to talk about here. So like I said, I've played through the first 3 campaigns. I've been generally trying to stay on the hardest difficulty because that's just how I prefer to play games in general. I like starting at the hardest and then working, and if that's too hard, I'll work my way down to a level that's kind of appropriate for me. And the campaigns as they're presented to you in the game are organized by difficulty. So the first 3 campaigns means the 3 easiest campaigns. I've played Tale of Two Brothers, The South Guard, and Orcish Incursion. And I think I have a solid grasp of the basics at this point. I'm still learning a lot of the advanced strategies and all of the different play styles of the different factions. As I said, I've tried out a few of the harder campaigns just to check them out, and I generally have been losing them, if not soundly, then at least by close margins. Usually within the first 2 or 3 scenarios of the campaign, I'll get stuck on something and hit a bit of a brick wall. The game is highly addictive, which is why you might have noticed I've only played 2 campaigns on stream here. I haven't actually been streaming any of the other play I've been getting out of this game, and most of that is just down to the fact that this game is extremely addictive. I've been spending a lot of my time off stream just thinking, oh, I've got an hour to kill, I'll just load up some Battle for Wesnoth, and then 2 or 3 hours later I've gone through the first 2 or 3 scenarios of a later campaign. So yeah, as I said, I completed the entire Orcish Incursion campaign in that fashion. I didn't actually stream that one, and I've tried out a bunch of the other campaigns too. I think a lot of what makes the game so addictive is just its simplicity. It's so easy to play. It's all mouse clicks. You just click a guy, click where you want him to go, and if he's attacking someone, you click the weapon you want him to use. That's really all there is to it. And at the same time, and where a lot of the complexity comes in, is that simplicity allows it to scale up very, very well. You get to control a ton of units here, where in traditional tactical RPG that might be a bit tedious, like Langrisser, which I think is another game that Wesnoth shares a few similarities with. Langrisser could get really tedious at times when you've got 100 units to move across the map. Here, it's just very simple, very streamlined. You can have these big pitched battles with dozens and dozens of units on both sides, and yet it flows very seamlessly. Plays quite quickly, very swift, very compelling and addictive in that fashion. And at the same time, incredibly deep. There are so many different variables to consider when it comes to where to position your units and which units to build. You've got terrain and the enemy resistances. You've got to still factor in your XP distribution among your guys, just as in a regular tactical RPG. You've got to time your attacks properly to align with the correct advantageous time of day as well. Since you got the day-night cycle here, you've got a zone of control system where you're strategically positioning your units to block off the enemy approach, kind of surrounding your vulnerable guys to keep the enemies away from them, all of that stuff. And at the same time you're doing all that, you've got the strategic concerns of taking valuable control points, holding the advantageous terrain, controlling towns and improving your income, and taking away the enemy's towns to sabotage theirs. There's fog of war missions where you've got to worry about scouting and information and all of that. At the same time, so you've got all that, almost every mission has a time limit where you've got to be doing all of this as quickly and efficiently as possible. And many missions have unique objectives as well, where it's not just assassinate the enemy leaders. Sometimes there's escort missions, sometimes you have multiple objectives to contend with, sometimes you have new game mechanics to factor in. So there's a ton of variety in the scenarios here, and that's just the scenario level decision making that goes into this. You've also got a ton of stuff that carries forward throughout the campaign. The campaign system here is actually quite robust. It's not just a string of isolated scenarios like in a lot of other tactical RPGs. The main thing that carries forward is you've got your units you can recall. So if you level up a unit in one mission, you can recall him by spending a bit of extra gold, and he's there in the next mission as well, and you can carry him throughout the whole campaign if you can manage to keep him alive. And so for that reason, XP distribution ends up mattering a whole bunch. If you're efficient about getting all the XP to your guys who are close to getting level ups, you get those stronger units that much faster. And at the same time, you also want to protect those guys, because that's a long-term investment, all of that XP that you've sunk into that unit. Losing your promoted units can be a really big blow that resonates throughout the rest of the campaign. It's a big deal when you lose a guy and you aren't going to have him for the rest of the campaign there. In addition to that, you've got a carryover gold system where all of the gold that you save at the end of a scenario, not all of it, but part of the gold that you have stored up at the end of a scenario will carry through to the next one. And you also get a bunch of bonus gold for finishing scenarios before the time limit. The earlier you finish them, the more bonus the more bonus gold you get that carries into the next scenario. So you've got to be, on the one hand, you've got XP milking to contend with. At the same time, you also want to be finishing swiftly and efficiently, minimizing your costs, maximizing the speed that you play through the scenarios to build up that gold advantage over time. And the game is really challenging. You need to take all of these things into consideration, at least on the hardest difficulty setting, in order to succeed. Really, this makes for really intense battles where every turn is extremely significant. You've got just all sorts of drama and tension with every enemy turn phase, where you think, are my guys gonna live? Are we gonna finish this in time? Are we going to finish this scenario efficiently enough to get enough gold to win the next scenario? So it makes for a really very pitched, intense experience. I've been really enjoying my time with the game so far to a large extent. I see this really has the potential to become one of my big regular games that I just play all the time in my spare time. Stuff like Tales of Maj'El, Age of Wonders, Sonic Mania, games that I come back to over and over and over again. With that said, it's still kind of tough to tell where I'll land with this game. That's kind of the high points, but it still feels like I've barely scratched the surface of this one. And with all of the good stuff that I've just mentioned, there's also some things I'm worried about. All of these positives comes come with some caveats, and I think the game might not end up being as good as I think it perhaps has the potential to be. There's a lot of trickiness with just the delicate balance of how to design a game like this. Or maybe I'm just talking out of my ass, and it's possible that the game is just beyond my capacity to fully enjoy the way I see a lot of other people do. And we're gonna talk a little bit more about that after the break. So everything I've discussed about the game so far makes it seem just brilliant, the best game ever. But all of that has been me describing the best times I've been having with the game. This is all Wesnoth at its best. But it took me quite some time to get to that level where I can really begin to appreciate the game and experience the good times. The first campaign that I tried out on stream, Tale of Two Brothers, was actually really rough. I played it on the hardest difficulty, and the first mission I actually got a strong first impression of the game. It was fun, intense, came down right to the wire. I finished off the enemy leader on the last activation of my last unit, and then I just hit a brick wall on the second mission and could not make my way past it. There's just tons of starting enemies. It's elves in forests, which is still the bane of my existence even to this day playing this game. You got elves in forests everywhere, elves everywhere. The enemy controls all of the towns, so they have, it seems, endless reinforcements. It was just impossible, and I got really frustrated with the game. I ended up turning down the difficulty, and that's kind of the tough thing about a deep game like this, is it's tough to know where you went wrong. So in the case of this Tale of Two Brothers campaign, there was a combination of factors. On the one hand, I didn't really understand the game mechanisms well enough to succeed at the game just yet. I didn't realize just how big a bonus the elves got in the forest. I didn't realize that the enemy unit production mechanics were actually balanced the same as yours, and that you can actually check the enemy's income and gold levels during the scenario, and if you just hold out long enough, they'll eventually run out. Yeah, a lot of stuff as far as damage types I didn't quite fully understand, but there's also, because of the whole campaign factor, it's also possible that you can essentially lose a scenario before it even begins. The missions are very tough. They expect you to come in with a lot of that bonus gold and promoted units from previous scenarios. So if you finish a battle just by the skin of your teeth, like I did in my first battle here, you might end up just not having enough stuff to push through to the end of the campaign. So yeah, all of these factors caused me to have to basically rewind and redo the campaign on easier difficulty setting, and then that sort of runs into another problem where everything scales down when you lower the difficulty. The enemy starts with fewer units, they have less income, less starting gold. It's just all these different things combined to make the game actually trivially easy. And there's a massive drop in difficulty from one difficulty setting to another. And as it turns out, the game isn't really all that fun when it's easy, because everything is so simplistic. It's just click, click, click. It's not a fun game anymore when you don't have to take all of this just vast array of strategic considerations into your decision making. And so yeah, it's just point click and roll over everything. The streamlined playstyle just doesn't doesn't appeal anymore when your decisions no longer matter. And in addition to that, when I actually played through Tale of Two Brothers on the easiest setting, it felt, in addition to just easy, it was also pretty messy. It had a disjointed story where you've got big time lapses between missions. It felt there was no flow or progression to it. It didn't really feel like a story, just kind of a smattering of unrelated incidents. And so I didn't really come away with a great first impression of Battle for Wesnoth after playing the first campaign. And this is the first one on the list. This is going to be a lot of people's introduction to Battle for Wesnoth. And whether you play on hard or easy, it's not really a great time. With that said, I was still intrigued by the game, and so I decided to give it another shot. I played the second campaign on stream, the South Guard, and it was like a night and day difference. I think the South Guard campaign was actually brilliant, and I had a fantastic time with it. You get to, unlike with the Tale of Two Brothers scenario, where it's basically just you have a handful of units you can recruit. It's all your just basic humans. I think you have 3 different unit types you get over the course of the campaign. South Guard, you get a ton of different units to play around with across multiple different factions. It's got kind of an interesting story where you build a bit of an alliance between humans and mermen and either elves or bandits. And so you get to try out a few units from a few different factions and kind of learn the ropes that way. And the maps are really well designed to make use of them. It's like, oh, I've got mermen, and here's a bunch of water kind of intersecting the main choke point on the bridge, so I can use that to my advantage. Oh, we're fighting undead, so I can use my bandits and their impact damage to get an advantage against them. It's a great tutorial. I learned a lot of the game mechanics by trying all these different things out. I learned how to utilize enemy weaknesses and resistances and terrain features and all of that to my advantage. Apart from that, the missions were a lot more varied and interesting. You've got missions where you've got to rush your leader to a specific destination. You've got fog of war missions where you're sort of traipsing through dank caves with a lot of choke points that you have to funnel your units down. You've got a big variety of enemy units to contend with too, where you've got all kinds of trolls and orcs and elves. So again, getting acquainted with all of those different types of units. It's better for learning the game, I felt, than the Tale of Two Brothers campaign. And in addition to that, you've got you've got a critical decision point in the middle of the campaign where you've got to pick a side, and that affects how the story branches off from there and affects how you play the campaign as well. You get different units depending on which side you choose, and it all culminates in this big epic finale that I just loved, where you're just fending off hordes and hordes of elves, and you've got to defend your capital. And it came right down to the wire on that final mission. You had to hold out for, I think it's 14 turns, and I could not have held out for 15 turns. If it was 15 turns, I would be screwed on that mission. It came down right to the end where I was just like repeatedly falling back. They went right back to my keep, where I had to just stack a bunch of bodies between along the outer walls to keep them away from my leader, and we pushed through in the end. And it was just, again, that type of really intense yet rewarding experience, like I was describing earlier on. I eventually learned that this was actually one of the campaigns that was very heavily reworked in the most recent patch, like on that April patch, a month before I started playing the game. They reworked this entire campaign. So in effect, this is arguably one of the newest campaigns in the game, or the one that's had the most recent reworking, the one that's been most recently paid attention to. So you can kind of get a sense of the progression of the designer's sense of how to make a good campaign over time. The standards have risen from where the game was at in 2003. I don't know for sure, but I would suspect that Two Brothers was one of the earlier campaigns that they made, and this newly revised one, like I said, was newly revised just a couple months ago. So yeah, I was gung-ho for the game then. I was addicted. I tried out a bunch of the other campaigns, and it was kind of hit or miss, and I usually hit that roadblock within the first 2 or 3 scenarios. But the one where that didn't happen was Orcish Incursion. I was able to play that one through right to the end, and That's because it was kind of easy and boring. I did not have a good time with Orcish Incursion. And this was in the hardest difficulty setting, by the way. There's just loads of just vanilla maps. I talked about the variety of the scenarios in this game. Most of Orcish Incursion is just you've got a base on one corner of the map, the enemy leader's got a base on the opposite corner, you've got towns dotted across the rest of the map, and you're just, it's almost like a multiplayer map against the AI, just that over and over again. And that leads to a lot of repetitive tactics. I kind of felt like I was just doing the same thing over and over again from one scenario to the next, where you find the good ground, set up your guys along advantageous terrain, and just let the enemy crash into you until you grind out all their resources and charge the base. That's really all there is to it, over and over again. And I didn't have a great time with it. I used to think that I wanted random maps in this game. I've been saying I've been trying a bunch of the different scenarios. That's mainly just because I feel like I often want to just pop in and just do a one-off scenario, you know, like just load up a random map is a feature I thought I wanted in this game, but I actually don't anymore because I think this game is highly reliant on extremely finely crafted, well-balanced scenarios and campaigns. I don't think you could do random maps in this game and make it fun. It's a really tough game to balance. The thing is, with all these different factors affecting the depth of the game, all the different stats, all the different strategic considerations, the different long-term considerations across a campaign, that makes it tough on the players, but I think it makes it even tougher on the scenario designers to actually craft a well-tuned, well-balanced experience. And that creates another confounding factor. Whenever I get stuck on a scenario, you got the question, is it me? Am I not good enough? Is it a mistake I made earlier on where I need to come back with more stuff and do better earlier in the campaign? Or is it that this is a badly balanced campaign and it's one of the ones that they need to work on? You will see a lot of apologists for this game online. I don't want to say apologists, but Wesnoth superfans will tell you that, oh, they've been balancing this game for 15 years. Everything is perfect. And I think that the Orcish Incursion campaign proves that it isn't. I might not be good enough to say that for sure whether the other campaigns are too hard, but I am good enough to know that this Orcish Incursion campaign is badly balanced. It is boring and easy, and is certainly not on par with the difficulty of the other scenarios labeled as rookie, or the challenging difficulty of the other rookie campaigns. And so you add to all of this one other big confounding factor underlying all of this, which is the RNG roll to hit mechanics, which we will discuss right away. Okay, so before we start to talk about the ways that the RNG affects Battle for Wesnoth, affects the game itself, we'll talk a little bit about the way RNG and roll to hit works in this game. It's actually a really simple system. Like all of the math in this game, so your units will do a fixed amount of damage. They have a fixed number of attacks that's based on their weapon, and then your chance to hit is all on the defender's side. Each unit has a specific percentage to hit that unit based on the type of terrain that it's on, which is generally in the 30 to 80 range. I don't think I've ever seen a defensive a chance to hit that's less than 30% or higher than 80%. And that all takes is all balanced around these 10% increments. So it's always 70 or 60 or 50%, never in between there. So it's essentially a D10 based system. You're basically rolling a 10-sided die to hit your enemies with every single attack, and the enemies get a counter attack every time you attack them as well. So if I go to hit them with my 5 melee attacks, they get to counter with their melee attack for whatever that damage is. So you can end up with situations where you're actually hurting yourself by attacking the enemy. And that's all there is to it. There are no other modifiers to your chance to hit. Now, the one other mitigating factor there is you've got a special type of attack called magic attacks, and those ignore the defender's terrain bonus. Magic attacks are always just a flat 70% chance to hit. And that's your best way to bypass RNG. If you got a little footpad or whatever with his 70% evasion, you can get around that by using your magic attack that has a 70% chance to hit. And with that said, 70% is as close as you get to a sure thing in this game. If you get a unit on really bad terrain, like most units have 80% chance to hit them if they're in water, but other than that, 70% is about the highest chance to hit you can expect in this game, and that can make for some really just frustrating situations when you end up getting a string of bad rolls on your side. As I said, this is the single most discussed and fiercely debated feature of the game, is the fact that every single attack is random and has a reasonably high chance to miss. If you check forum threads, reviews, they will all talk about this endlessly. And yeah, it's really frustrating sometimes. No matter what type of strategy you have, it's going to involve attacking enemies. There's no way around it. All you do in this game is move and attack, and every attack has a high chance to miss just based on that D10 roll to hit system. So you end up with situations where you will attack multiple times in a row at 70% chance to hit and just miss all of them. Or you end up in situations where the enemy attacks you with a very low probability to hit and they hit them all and take out your promoted guy. And it's really frustrating at times. I can see why this is so hotly contested, because people get really angry about this. I get really angry about this, and thus the debate and discussion ensues. So then the question is the game too random? Does the randomness in Battle for Wesnoth enhance the strategy in here, or does it detract from it? I don't want to do a full rehash of all of the arguments on both sides of this debate, but I will cover a couple of the most common ones that I've seen out there. First off, is the defenders of the RNG system will say, well, the fact that you're doing poorly under this RNG system is because you're not playing around it properly. You're staking everything on one big attack that might miss. You need to have backup plans. You need to have backup plans upon backup plans. And I feel like this is a bad argument that kind of misses the point of the criticism. I'm sure most people realize, yes, don't stake everything on a single attack that might miss. Have a backup plan, for sure. The problem is that your backup plan is equally RNG reliant. So it's like, okay, I'm going to send in my spearman to finish this guy off. My backup plan, I'm going to send another spearman if he misses. And if he misses, I'm going to send another spearman. And at some point, you run out of spearmen. It's just all of your attacks miss, and your backup plans didn't matter because every backup plan is equally RNG reliant. And that's what people are complaining about. That's why I think this argument misses the point. People aren't complaining about, oh, my one all-in attack missed. It's, I had layers of backup plans and they all missed, because that's the way randomness works. Sometimes you get strings of improbable results because you're rolling a lot of dice in this game. So I don't really buy the have layers of backup plans argument. Obviously you do that, but that doesn't fully mitigate the frustrations with the RNG. Also, the other argument, which is not quite as obviously terrible as is the notion that RNG will always even out over the long run. Even if you have a string of bad luck in the short term, in the long run, that will even out, and as long as you keep your play solid and consistent, you will win out in the end when the RNG averages out after a long sequence, over the course of a long scenario. The problem with that is that bad RNG can send ripples forward because of the way that that the game is so strategic. Everything carries forward. So you get a string of bad RNG, and some RNG is more impactful than others. For example, an attack that does tons of damage will impact the overall outcome of the battle more than an attack that does low damage. So you can end up in a situation where you just, over the course of one turn, you get a sequence of really bad rolls and one of your guys dies. Or even two of your guys die. That has a massive impact on the rest of the scenario, the rest of the campaign even. So even though the RNG will eventually even out over time, the damage has been done. That one sequence of bad dice rolls permanently impacts your strategic situation. It makes it that much more difficult to come back, and you end up with more situations where it increases that range of bad possible RNG. My situation is worse now as the result of this bad RNG, and now I'm going to be placed in worse and worse situations, and it just kind of snowballs from there. And potentially through not a lot of fault of your own, you can have solid positioning and strategy and all, and just get a turn where the enemies do more than twice as much damage as would be expected, and half your army gets wiped out. Okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration. If half your army gets wiped out in one bad turn, you have made bad plays, but still, over the course of like three bad turns like that, where you lose a few guys, makes it impossible to win, potentially. So yeah, I don't buy the RNG evens out over time argument. It's bad RNG in the short term, swings your situation in the campaign in the long. With that said, I said I wasn't going to rehash the whole RNG debate, and I've kind of ended up doing that now. There's a forum post that I think does a very solid overview of the reasons why RNG is the way it is in Battle for Wesnoth. It's a post called Luck in Wesnoth on the official Battle for Wesnoth forums. It's actually written by a guy named Dave, who I believe I'm right about this. I believe this is actually David White, the original developer, the founder of the whole Wesnoth project. And he actually makes a really solid explanation that I largely agree with. So if you want a more intelligent overview of the arguments for and against RNG, I recommend reading that post. I'll still try to give my own summary and opinions of it here. And actually, to his credit, he actually makes some solid arguments on both sides, both for and against the way RNG works in Battle for Wesnoth. My final takeaway on the whole thing is that there's not really a single right way to do RNG and roll to hit in these types of games. It really comes down to a matter of taste. I know that probably sounds wishy-washy and non-committal, but I think I can solidly demonstrate why that's the case. And again, Dave goes into this in a lot more detail in that Luck in Wesnoth forum post. Essentially, you can make all of these criticisms of all the things that are bad about RNG in Battle for Wesnoth, and a lot of those criticisms are true. But to get a full perspective of the notion of RNG in games, and strategy games in particular, generally, you need to look at the alternative. Look at fully deterministic systems alongside that. And when you line them up side by side, random systems versus strictly deterministic systems, you find that there are pros and cons on both sides, and a fair bit of middle ground in between. So on one hand, you've got the learning curve. Randomness adds a big confounding factor to your strategic analysis in these types of games, and it gives you something to blame. It's anytime you do badly, well, it's like, well, the dice rolls were against me, and it kind of makes it more difficult to learn the game. Games with heavy RNG tend to be more difficult to learn as a result of that, whereas purely deterministic games are easier to learn. There's just a single fixed outcome. I do this thing, and I know that this is going to be the result of that every time. And with that said, the other thing is that games that are deterministic are predictable. And so that can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on your tastes. personally, I agree with the Wesnoth developers that you want at least some element of unpredictability in a strategy game. If you can just work out everything in your head and perfectly predict everything that's going to happen, it becomes more of a puzzle game than a strategy game. You've got to end up with very simplistic analysis on any given turn where it's, oh, this is clearly the right move. Whereas when you add some uncertainty to the outcome, that's kind of what makes it interesting, is the uncertainty of the outcome. And it also gives you the freedom to take risks as well. Whereas in a deterministic system, you always know what's going to happen. When you add the RNG into there, it gives you the freedom to make risky plays with big payoffs. So then you've got to decide, well, is it worth the risk? And it's fun taking risks. There's kind of a basic appeal of RNG that you see in something like a slot machine. As long as you're invested in the outcome, RNG can be fun. It can also be crushing, and that's the downside of that same argument. Again, our upsides and downsides across the board here. And yeah, honestly, the way that the randomness confounds your analysis, it makes the game harder to learn, but it also increases its strategic depth. It really taxes your analytical, strategic decision making in a way that a purely deterministic game simply can't, or at least not in the same way. And the one other thing when you take into consideration is the notion of luck versus skill, which is one way where perhaps deterministic games have the upper hand. Whereas on the one hand, it's almost paradoxical. On the one hand, games with a lot of randomness can be a lot more skill-based because they're more difficult to analyze. The decisions are harder the analysis is tougher, the decisions are harder to make. It tests your decision-making skills a lot more than a deterministic game. On the other hand, it adds that luck factor where you're making all of these complex strategic analyses and determinations, and in the end, it might not matter in the end. It might come down to just bad dice rolls determining the outcome, which is something that you don't see in deterministic systems. So that's another downside. So in the final analysis, you end up with a bit of give and take on both sides, where there are some pros to luck-based games, or I don't want to say luck-based games, games with large random factors versus deterministic games. There are some upsides, some downsides, and some things that kind of fall in between based on the player's taste. And again, I think that forum post gives a solid explanation and justification for why Wesnoth is the way it is. So that's a take on the concept of randomness in strategy games generally, but that still leaves the question of whether the amount of randomness in Battle for Wesnoth is the right amount. So there's the question of, can strategy games with a lot of randomness be good? Can randomness be a good thing for a strategy game? And then there's the particular, where is the randomness implemented well in this game? Is the game too random or just random enough? And I think it might be too random. I'm not quite sure yet, and we'll discuss a little bit more of that a little bit. So, after all of this discussion, I'm still not entirely sure where I sit with this game. Like I said, it still feels like it might be a bit too random for my taste. And there's an in-game statistics tool that gives a bigger picture of the full story of what I'm talking about. So there's actually a handy little feature in the game where you just hit S and it brings up a statistics tab that tells you the way that the random die rolls have broken in the scenario. You get a breakdown of what the average expected damage output is on both sides, just based on the averages of the damage rolls, and then it tells you the actual outcome, so you can see, oh, I did 30% more damage than the average, or I dealt 50% less damage than the average, and it gives you the breakdown of how the die rolls have shaken out this turn and also overall for the entire scenario. And so it becomes kind of a little bit of a rage button, if you will. Every time things start going wrong and I'm losing and I get frustrated and I'm cursing my bad luck, I bring up the stats tab to just see how bad it is. And when I was first starting out the game, that was actually a useful thing. I was actually able to realize, oh, this was a terrible plan that I had here, because I actually got slightly better than average RNG and I still ended up with a disastrous outcome. So there was clearly something wrong with my battle plan here. But on the other hand, as I get more and more experience with the game, more and more often I get enraged and I bring up that stats tab and I find that the rolls have broken massively against me. Either I'll get swept in one turn and it's just like, oh, that was a freaking disaster. How bad was it? And I bring up the stats tab and the enemies have done like 60 to 80% more damage than expected, or at least a 60 to 80% swing in RNG against me over the course of one turn. Or if I'm just getting slowly ground down and it's just over time it just don't work out and I'm just like racking my brain. It's like, what did I do wrong? Was it just was it just RNG was against me overall? Was I just disadvantaged because of the rolls? And I bring up the stats tab and sure enough, I had like a 30% disadvantage over the course of the entire scenario. And I think that kind of undermines all of the aspects of complex strategic decision making that I've gone over that are the high point of the game. It's all undermined by the fact that you can have a solid battle plan and just really all you're doing is the better the decisions you make, the wider the range of acceptable bad RNG. So if I have a bad battle plan, I might win the battle, if RNG breaks even or slightly in my favor, but I'm gonna lose as the instant I start getting bad die rolls. Whereas if I have a really solid plan, I can weather a little bit of bad RNG, maybe in the range of 10 to 20% over the course of the scenario. But is the strategy good enough to weather 30% bad RNG over the course of the scenario, or 80% over the course of one turn? That's kind of a balancing factor, like something that the developers and campaign designers need to consider is what's the breaking point? How badly are we going to let things get for the player and still let them win? And it's kind of a fine line. It's like, really, I'm putting all this work in just to slightly increase the probability that I'm gonna win in the end, and it's a fine line. And I don't want to talk like I'm an expert here. It could still be that I'm just not good enough at the game. And empirically, there's a way to show that. You can just go out there on YouTube and see replays of scenarios where, other people out there are winning these consistently on the hard difficulty settings, so clearly it must be me. But there's another factor in play here, which is the save and reload system, which is, in the way in this game it works in this game, very simple. You can save and reload anytime you want. In fact, the game auto saves for you at the start of every turn. So anytime you get that bad RNG going for you, you can just save state back to a previous point and replay the whole thing and hope for better dice rolls. And that's not really the way I like to play games, and I think that's actually I don't think that most Wesnoth players will do that, where they'll just keep on reloading until a particular attack goes their way. But maybe you reload if you get a single turn of spectacularly bad RNG. And actually, reading a lot of the forum posts and discussion on this game, that seems to be the standard way that people mitigate the randomness of this game. It's like, well, if I just get ridiculously bad RNG, I'll just reload the turn. And that's not really the kind of playstyle that appeals to me. Like, it adds another confounding factor of like, well, just how much save reload is acceptable. Do I reload one turn where I get bad RNG? Do I reload every time something doesn't go my way and I lose, a third tier unit? That kind of thing. I prefer Iron Man style play in these types of games. I prefer not reloading ever if I can help it. I did over the course of my on-stream playthroughs a little bit, but that was mostly just to basically just to fix my own stupidity, just like little fixes. Like I would misunderstand the objective of the scenario, and it's like, oh, I needed to move my leader there instead of just any unit. I need to rewind 3 turns and redo other things. I don't know. It's kind of a fine line. You need to set your own standards as to when is an acceptable time and how frequently is acceptable to save and reload. And the developers say that's on you, the player. We trust the player to make responsible decisions as to what is the right approach to saving and reloading in this game, which is fine. And this is a highly customizable game. That's the other thing the developers say as well. If you don't like the RNG system, just mod it. There are mods out there that can completely rework the damage system to be more deterministic, less RNG based. So you can just use those mods. You can customize the game to the way you want. But that's also not really my style. Like I don't want to play game designer when I'm playing a game. I don't like tweaking a bunch of options. I would prefer to just, that's design side work. I would prefer for a game designer to just hand me a game and say, here, this is the game. It's well balanced, all tuned to specification. Try it out. You'll have a good time. I realize that's largely laziness on my part. There's, again, a fine balance. You need to be willing to put in some effort to find the right way to play a game for you. I like some options, but not too much freedom. And this game might a little bit too much freedom for me. And in the end, I think this game might end up, as opposed to one of my regulars that I play all the time, this one also might end up being one of my white whales, a tantalizing obsession that just constantly eludes you. A game with flashes of brilliance that is occasionally you can see, oh, this could be amazing. I could just grasp onto it. If I could just wrap my head around this game fully, and yet the more you try, it's just something doesn't click. It's not quite there for you. There's a couple of games like that have been my white whales over the year. Vagrant Story is one of them. So many brilliant things about that game, just in terms of the setting, the story, atmosphere, even some of the gameplay systems. But then you've got the weapon system, which is just baffling, incomprehensible mess to me, and it's frustrating because I know other people out there will say, "Oh, you just need to do this and understand this. Have different types of weapons for different resistance types." But there's like a bunch of different layered resistance. I could never figure out the weapon damage system in Vagrant Story, and it massively impacted my ability to enjoy the game. And for other people, it's Dark Souls. Dark Souls is a common type of white whale game for other people, where it's like all these great things going on that you can see. They're right there in front of you, but you can't quite grasp onto them. The difficulty is the thing that gets in the way for a lot of people for Dark Souls. And that's it for me here. I see all this brilliant stuff. I have some amazingly great times with this game when everything's just finely tuned and balanced right. But when it goes off, it's just frustrating, and I'm wondering, is there anything to this at the bottom of it all? Is it just I'm putting all this effort into learning this game just to slightly increase my odds of success? Will I eventually get it if I try hard enough? Will it be worth the effort in the end? And I don't know. Maybe mods are the answer in the end. I know some people have said that there's some good deterministic mods or pseudo RNG mods to kind of balance out the frustrating elements of randomness. So maybe I'll have to try those eventually. But for the time being, I'm not giving up just yet. I'm going to continue working through the base campaigns with all the vanilla settings. I'm still addicted, even though I'm constantly frustrated. And largely, I'm still enjoying my time with the game. The good scenarios, the good, interesting, pitched, balanced scenarios have been a really great time, even though I'm still constantly frustrated by the other maybe bad scenarios, maybe ones that are too tough to me. It's still too early to tell what's going on here and why I can't quite get this game fully. Final score, 5 out of 5, maybe 3 out of 5. I don't know. It's probably not lower than 3 out of 5. This is a solid game, if nothing else. Yeah, gonna keep playing, trying out more campaigns. You can check them out here on the stream. I'll probably be streaming more of this game in the future. Probably check out some mods eventually, and then on some future podcast we will revisit Battle for Wesnoth. So, those of you who listened to last week's podcast and have been following me on Twitter and here on the stream talking about the podcast may notice that there is no Chronicles of Teddy mini review this week, like I said there would be. I'm still having a tough time working out how to predict how long a given podcast will be, and it's often I don't realize how much time it's going to take to discuss some of these featured games until after I've finished writing out all of my notes and organizing things. I find on average, it seems to take me about 10 minutes per page of notes. Trying to condense that down still. I think that'll come with practice. We've obviously gone a bit long this week as well. It's a tricky thing. I keep finding more and more things to talk about as I write out notes for these big, deeply interesting games. And so I think what we might end up changing the format where instead of doing one big game and one little game each week, we will do either a big game or we'll do 2 or 3 little games. So Chronicles of Teddy, I have all my notes written out. I just don't have time to cover it on this week's podcast. So we'll do that some other time with a couple other mini reviews. And with that said, let's get into the mailbag. We have a question here from Mayswale52. This one actually came in via Twitch chat last week, right as I started to do the podcast outro. So he just kind of just barely missed the cutoff there, but we'll get into it this week. Mayswale writes, how much preparation do you do for these? Is it like a full script or something? So I do a decent amount of preparation for these podcasts, but not a full script. That would just be too much work for a weekly podcast. I don't think I could maintain a weekly schedule if I tried to fully script out everything for these podcasts. And apart from that, part of the reason I'm doing the podcast is I would like to get better at discussing things off the cuff. So unscripted, but with heavy notes to help me organize the flow of things is the approach that I take. First up, I pick a game, decide what I'm going to talk about that week. I make a rough set of notes that usually at work, I'll just scribble away in my notebook any interesting thoughts that come to mind about the game I'm going to be talking about. And then the third step is to make my show notes. So I've got my notes in my notebook, and then I type them all out in a Google Doc, and then I basically filter through them, take out the stuff that I think might not be worth discussing or is not that interesting. I organize everything to try to get a nice flow going on, and then expand on things a little bit to just fully flesh out the ideas and make sure that everything comes across clearly. And then the final step is to put in the slides and the music and everything that I have to do at home, since I can't really do media presentation stuff on my work computer. I would like to, so the notes take a fair bit of my preparation. I spend a lot of time at work writing and organizing these notes. In the long run, I would like to rely less on my pages of notes here as I get more experienced at this sort of thing, just get better at speaking off the cuff to be able to just name a game and just go from there and have a good discussion out of it. But for the time being, I lean pretty heavily on my notes here. So there's a decent bit of preparation that goes into the podcast. Thank you, Maze Whale, for the question. It's nice to actually have something to talk about during this mailbag segment for once. And with that said, done a lot of mail this week. This one comes in from Void Crow, giving some feedback on last week's Iconoclasts episode. Void Crow writes, "Hey Jasu, I just finished the second podcast and I thought I'd give a bit of feedback. While I enjoyed it a lot like the first one, I was expecting to hear more about some specific things, like the boss you didn't like, the scene at the space station, and the ending revelation. I know the reason you avoided talking more about some of these things is because of spoilers, but honestly, and maybe I'm alone in this, I wouldn't mind if you spoiled all the games you review, especially if it's been over a year since release. I was just expecting it to be more like the Shining Force review, where you spoiled some story facts, and that allowed you to talk in more detail about your opinion of the game. By the way, sorry about my English, it's not my native language. Well, I think that's all. Thank you for the podcasts." Thanks a ton for the feedback there, Void Crow. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad you've been enjoying the podcast. The English was no problem at all. I was able to understand your feedback here just fine. I cleaned it up a little bit to be able to read it on air. So, to talk generally about the notion of spoilers, I am pretty strongly anti-spoiler when it comes to just stories and media in general. I really like experiencing things completely fresh, ideally knowing nothing about any given video game or movie that I come into. That's just, there's a little backstory I could get into that, but basically I learned by accident that is the way that I prefer to enjoy things. And so for that reason, I like to afford others the same opportunity. I try to avoid spoiling stuff as much as I can in my discussions of games and whatnot. With that said, I accept that past some point in time, it's just kind of stupid to worry too much about spoilers. Things need to pass into the sort of public domain of acceptable conversation topics after a certain point. People need to be able to talk freely about these things without worrying about spoilers constantly. So it's what determines that? I think it's the passage of time, but it's a fine line as to when that cutoff point occurs. Now, you suggest maybe if it's been over a year. For me personally, a year is still a bit too fresh for me to be fully comfortable spoiling things, and that's because I almost never experience media within the first year of its release. I like to wait on things and kind of take a long-term approach, see what people think about different games that come out, see if they're still talking about them a year later, kind of wait for the critical consensus to establish itself before I go in there. It's also a cost-saving measure as well. I really prefer to wait for sales and that kind of thing. So in fact, yeah, if you look at Iconoclasts, I didn't play that game until well over a year after it came out. So, and I wouldn't have wanted anyone to spoil it for me before that point. So that was kind of my reasoning behind doing a spoiler-free discussion of Iconoclasts last week. With that said, you did ask about some specific details about Iconoclasts, and so since we're here this week, I thought I might talk a bit about those specific points. Those of you listening at home might consider this to be your spoiler warning right here. We're going to dive into a bit of spoilerific talk about Iconoclasts. So as far as the boss that I didn't like, that was the Elro fight, or not against Elro, but where you play as Elro. He's Robin's gimpy amputee brother with the broken sword. You see a lot of these types of fights in games nowadays, where you have kind of a broken main character that you control, where you have a fight that's more for dramatic effect, where you have just broken restrictive controls to emphasize the brokenness of the character you're playing. And some fights or some games do that really well, and I don't have any problem with the notion of a fight that's bad for story purposes in general. I just thought that the pacing was a bit off on this one, just for the type of fight that it is, where it's basically just a fight for dramatic effect, where you get to, basically have a cripple fight with Elro. I thought it was too long for what it was. It kind of dragged a bit for my taste, and it was also too difficult. I ended up losing my first attempt at the fight. It's really simple. It's basically just a game of Simon Says, where you're reading the boss's tells and acting appropriately, and then it speeds up over the course of the fight. And then if you lose at the end, like I did, You got to redo the whole thing, and it just was no good. I don't think the fight needed to be as long or as difficult as it was to get the full effect that they wanted for the story. As far as the space station scene, so I'm assuming that this would be the part where Royal dies. It didn't really work on. I thought it was an effective scene. I'm impressed with just a lot of the drama and storytelling going on with that scene. It's just in terms of emotional resonance. I talked a fair bit about this in the podcast, just because I found Royal to be an unlikable character in general, and he was just kind of annoying throughout the game. I didn't really affect me much when you had to leave him behind to die on the space station. In fact, I was quite callous about it on stream. I saw it coming. Like, as soon as you load up Royal onto your shoulders, carry him out of the space station, I said out loud, hey, this is like the end of Bastion. If we get the opportunity to dump this loser, I'm totally going to do it. And sure enough, when you get to the point where you need to dump his body in front of the sensor to hold the door open, I was just like, oh, cool. Drop him there. See ya, loser. I'm getting out of here. And that was it. So yeah, I saw it. I called it. I dumped the body and moved on. But that said, I don't want to shit all over the scene or anything. It's an effective scene, and Royal's story, just his character arc, or lack thereof even, is pretty interesting. I described him in the podcast last week as a preening narcissist, which makes him annoying as a character, but he has a good reason to be that way. This is the way he was raised. He is a true believer in the faith that he was brought up in. He's the heir to one concern, mother's heir. He's completely naive also. A lot of the other characters you meet in this game, they're kind of cynical and worldly about the whole one concern religion, especially Mother when you meet her later on. But Royal is a true believer. He's completely naive. He buys all of this stuff hook, line, and sinker, and that makes him a nuisance for everyone else. He's generally despised and shit upon by the agents that you meet throughout the game, and especially Mother when you meet her later on. Yet despite all of this, all these people telling him that he's stupid and annoying and he's doing dumb things that are going to ruin things for everyone, he still remains firmly convinced of his specialness throughout. Like, every time an agent defies him or insults him, he's just like, no, I'm Mother's special little boy. You've got to listen to me. And that kind of thing just makes him really annoying and kind of dumb. And he doesn't really change. He goes through some dramatic experiences that are kind of harrowing. You see him get shaken up at various points throughout the plot. The scene with Black, where she just pounds his face in, and the scene with Mother especially, where she finds out that he's not actually Mother's special little guy, and she actually despises him. But he kind of remains unflappable in the face of all of this. He recovers very quick. He's shaken up a bit, but he recovers very quickly after each of these experiences and returns to his old self. He has a little bit of a character arc where, after Mother dies, he kind of steps up and takes charge. Like, oh, it's time for Mother's special little boy to become a special little man. And he takes charge of the one concern and decides he's going to go and meet the giant space worm on the moon and save humanity from his wrath. And that's what all. So it's all building up to this big scene where Royal fulfills his duty, fulfills his life's purpose as the communicator to this giant space worm deity that they worship. And so yeah, he beseeches the space worm and says, please overlook our flaws. We beg you for mercy. And the space worm just kind of disregards him, gives no response whatsoever, no indication that it's even sentient or understands human speech at all. And in response to this, Royal throws a royal tantrum. He actually attacks the space worm, and he's like, yeah, basically throwing a tantrum. Pay attention to me. You have to listen to me because I'm the chosen one. And again, it makes sense because that's the way he was brought up. He really believes that he's the one, that this person of cosmic importance. But it makes him, just kind of really annoying and stupid and naive, and I didn't like him. And the scene after this giant space worm, where the space worm electrifies him, is actually pretty effective. Like, this is the point where he doesn't bounce back from this one. His ego is shattered once he realizes that the giant space worm doesn't apparently give a shit about him, and his whole existence has been a lie. Everybody was right about him. You really are an idiot. You really are nothing. really did doom the world. He realizes that all of the shit people have been giving him over the course of the game has been on point and correct. And he doesn't really recover from this. It leaves him suicidal, and he's just kind of a broken person after that. And then he dies. There is no redemption arc. Robin tries to rescue him, carry him out of the space station, but you have to dump his body on the door sensor to get out of there alone. And that is Royal's story. So it's a really effective and interesting little story, but because Royal himself is so unlikable, it just didn't have any emotional impact for me. And again, I talked in depth about that on last week's podcast. Oh yeah, the last thing was the ending revelation. I assume you're talking about at the final phase of the final boss, where you discover there's a Birdman inside of the space worm who's piloting it, and sorry, this is a good example of where I don't think I'm qualified to discuss the details of the story, which is another reason why I didn't go too much into spoiler details last week. So yeah, you get to the final phase of the final boss, and it turns out that there was a Birdman alien piloting the space worm all along, and that's that. Yeah, the giant Birdman inside the space worm. I so it kind of changes the tone of the ending a little bit, whereas the space worm was a little bit mysterious, almost majestic. You didn't really know what he was all about. Is it even intelligent? Is it sentient? Does it understand the things that are being said to it? But then you open it up and you see that there's this Birdman piloting it inside, and the Birdman clearly is intelligent. He uses technology. He's pissed off about something to do with Ivory. Again, a bit hazy on the details of the story here. And for that reason, I don't know. I don't know if it makes a huge difference to the story whether or not the space worm is sentient or whether he's being controlled by a Birdman. It's funny. I enjoyed seeing the Birdman pop out and angrily tap that Ivory meter for some reason. But again, this is a point where I'm kind of missing the details, and it didn't. If there is some kind of dramatic revelation here where it shifts the plot on its head or something, that was completely lost on me. For me, it was just kind of a funny, pointless little twist. So that's the mailbag. We're gonna check chat quickly here for any questions. Looks like it's pretty quiet today, which is fine because we have gone on for quite some time already. So that is the show for this week. Next week, I think I'm going to try out that whole mini review thing that I talked about. We're going to cover a few different games that I played last year, the tentative schedule. We're definitely going to do Chronicles of Teddy, and then I'm thinking The Vagrant and Time Spinner in addition to that. Depending on how preparation goes, again, it's tough to predict how much I'm going to have to say about these games, so maybe we end up doing only 2 of these in the end. But that's the tentative plan for next week, is we're going to review Chronicles of Teddy, The Vagrant, and Time Spinner. Until then, you can find me here on Twitch. If you have any questions or feedback you'd like to have addressed on the podcast, you can leave a comment here on the podcast page, either on Podomatic or YouTube. You can reach me by DM on Twitch or Twitter, and links to all of these can be found in the description for the podcast. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you next time.